Greetings and welcome to Mount Olympus. I am Hercules Invictus, and today I am very proud to bring you Brian's Drive-In Theater with Brian Walker. Greetings and welcome, Brian. How are you today?
I'm well tonight, Hercules. How are you?
I'm doing awesome. It's right before the election, and I'm interviewing candidates for different things, everything from mayor to local board of education. I'm sorry, and it's very interesting. Get talked to a lot of interesting people with a lot of interesting views on how things should unfold, and that's always very exciting.
Hmm. I went out today and appreciated the fall colors in Western Maryland, which was beautiful today. It was a nice day, about 65 degrees, partly sunny, and beautiful fall colors. This has been our prettiest fall that I can remember for a long time.
Yeah, it was beautiful out. I got out today, and it was very, it was great to be out and about, and the
Mhm.
weather was good. It looked like it was going to rain for a while, but it didn't.
I know we live about 6 hours apart, but it sounds like we have about the same
Same
weather.
weather.
Anyway, tonight I wanted to continue our discussion of, watching at least one horror movie. And what I've been finding is I've been watching two per day. I've been trying to focus on movies that I either don't remember. You guys might have watched them 15 years ago, but don't really remember the plot, or films that I picked up on physical media, DVDs, years ago, and just never got around to watching. We've been going through our DVD collection, trying to whittle it down, and not having much luck, quite honestly.
I sympathize. I'm doing the same, and I'm not having much luck either.
I'm really proud of ourselves, though. I mean, I think we've done a great job at collecting really obscure titles, stuff that you're probably never going to find on the streaming services for the most part. I did purge a lot of our stuff that can be easily found on the internet because it's public domain. But I've even got some public domain stuff that's in such good, the print qualities are in such good shape that just in case the internet should go boom one day and
Hey,
go away.
I'll do that. I once was given a Kindle by my eldest son.
Oh yeah, I
So
have one of those.
I put all the stuff on the Kindle, thousands of books on the Kindle. So I started getting rid of the actual books. And then something happened with my Kindle.
Mm.
It was something happened in Amazon, so I wasn't able to access thousands of books. So it took a while to straighten that out, and I finally got them back. But after that, I had to gather some of the books that I got rid of, which was much more expensive than having kept them in the first place.
Yeah, I'll bet. Yeah, used books and used DVDs don't bring in much money, do they?
No, they don't. But when you want to acquire them, then they cost you much money.
This is true. I will go along with that. Anyway, when we were going through, when I was going through our formidable DVD collection, and I haven't gone through the whole thing yet. It's that formidable. I pulled out several films that we purchased. Some of them I didn't even know that we had. That were still in their plastic wrap, and one of them was the first movie I want to talk about tonight. It's a film that I saw as a child, but you had only the dimmest recollections of it, and that's Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. Now, there's many different versions of this one, but this is the first sound version. It was produced by Paramount in 1931, and it stars Frederick March, an actor that I'm used to seeing in light comedies or maybe some dramas as well. Um, and he puts in a really impressive performance. This is a straight up horror movie. And even though it's Paramount, it has some Universal like undertones to it. It's clearly they've spent money on it, like Universal did with its horror films. But they used actors that you wouldn't ordinarily associate with horror films, like Frederick March, who won an Academy Award for his performance, and I see why he does a stellar job in this. Miriam Hopkins is this B girl in it, would be, well, prostitute that Dr. Hyde falls in love with. And she is excellent. I thought, I was afraid that she would, sort of veer over into melodrama, and she does not. She actually does a great job. She's very believable as this, low rent prostitute. Um, and Frederick March, he does a stunning job at good versus evil, which had to be hard to do. And the thing that I find most interesting about it are the transformation shots that they do when Dr. Jekyll begins turning into Mr. Hyde. And some of it, this is 1931, so special effects are practically not. You could turn off the camera and then turn it back on. That was about it, and do things with lighting. And that's how they did some of the transformation scenes. Is they put blue makeup on, and then it would have a blue filter. But when they wanted to show him transform, they would remove the filters. As many of them as they had, and he would contort and distort his facial features, and then they would cut to a different scene when he had his mostly his full makeup as Dr. Or as Mr. Hyde. And his Mr. Hyde makeup is really good. I mean, in watching the film, I would never guess that this was Frederick March. I mean, he does a spectacular job. It is worth watching. It's a disturbing performance, but it's an excellent performance, and it is worth watching for his transformation scenes and his performance as well as Miriam Hopkins. I will say this: the movie is extremely dated, and it is not as fluid as, I guess yeah, that's probably the best word I can use. It's not as fluid as the Universal horror films overall. It does veer into melodrama a lot with some of the supporting characters, and it's shot like a melodrama too, and that's a little disconcerting. But the performances of the two principal actors are just incredible, and I think it's something that really should be seen. And I couldn't believe that we had this DVD and it had never been unwrapped, because that's a seminal horror film.
Yes.
And to tell you the truth, I had never really thought about it a whole lot, but I'd always associated. I thought, well, that's probably Universal. I'd never really thought about it, and was shocked to find that it was Paramount. Well, in this DVD, there's actually two versions of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. There's the 1931 version with Frederick March. And by the way, 1931 must have been a great year to go to the theater. All those fantastic movies, Dracula, Frankenstein. Wow, that must have been. They were really competing for your dime back then. But the other version of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde is the 1942 version with Spencer Tracy, and I wanted to flip that one over because there again, this is not an actor I would associate with horror films. Now, I do think that Spencer Tracy was an excellent actor, and I'm dying to see his version of the movie. And since it's only 10 years later or so, but sound and film stock and techniques had improved so much just in those 10 years that if you see a movie from 1930 back to back with the movie from 1940, it looks like they're 50 years apart. There's just a world of difference, especially in the sound. Sound technology got much better very quickly in the early days of sound films. And Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde is in very good shape. The copy that I don't know that it has been restored. I have no idea. I didn't look into that. But the copy that I have looks good enough. The print's in pretty good shape. It's a little grainy here or there. But lighting wise, it's very easy to watch. It's easy to see. Some films are so dark and so grainy, and you find that a lot in horror films. And if you can't pump up the light behind them, it's impossible to see. My movie of the day today is a good example of that. It's The Beast of Yucca Flats, which was produced in 1961, and it stars Tor Johnson. Today is Tor Johnson's birthday. He would be 120 years old if he were
Birthday
still
Troy
alive.
Johnson, you were bright
Yeah,
and landline from outer space.
yes. Well, Tor, if you look at his filmography, uh, he was in a lot of television shows. He appeared uncredited in a lot of films well before Ed Wood ever met him. Um, he had some experience out of Ed Wood's regulars. He probably had the most acting experience, other than Bela Lugosi. You know, he knew his stuff, and he knew enough to know when to hit his marks and when to look menacing and when to look simple and befuddled. Hallmarks of really smart, really intelligent actors. And I know that he always played this big, you usually a big character that didn't have great intellect or anything like that, but in reality I think he did. I think he was a fairly bright individual. And I maybe he wasn't, because agreeing to star in The Beast of Yucca Flats was not a good idea. And actually, it turned out to be Tor Johnson's last credited screen role, certainly last starring role. He was in a couple of other movies beyond that, but he was uncredited. One of them was The Monkey's Head.
I
Uh,
remember that one.
yeah, there's another. Well, it's not a horror film, but there's another film that I haven't seen in years. I know we've got a copy of it somewhere, but I was a big Monkeys fan when I was a little kid. They used to show the Monkeys. It was in rerun by that time. But they used to show it like on Saturday mornings. And the paper records on the back of your honeycomb box would often have like a Monkeys single, or Bobby Sherman, or somebody like that. I always was a big Monkeys fan. Anyway, The Beast of Yucca Flats. My apologies to everybody who watched it from the link that I have posted from my Facebook page. Uh, it's a fun movie. I like it. It's really short too. I like it because I know something of the history of the principals in it, like Tor Johnson, Barbara Francis, who was married to the director of the film, Coleman Francis. Anthony Cardoza was one of the producers, and Anthony Cardoza and Coleman Francis spent some time in the early '60s making truly awful films, and this is one of them. They had their biggest star, this one though, with Tor Johnson, certainly name recognition, you know. And the movie isn't shot in sync sound. They couldn't afford it. So it was shot, in 16 millimeter and silent. And then they went back in and dubbed it very poorly. And in order to not have to um, dub it, whereby you could see people's lips move and the words coming out of them approximated something normal. He didn't want to do that. So any dialogue at all occurs off screen. It's either narrated, and the narration is incomprehensible. Some of the phrases that come out of the narration make absolutely no sense, have no bearing on the film at all. It's just like it's a very Virginia Woolf kind of narration. There's nothing linear about it. Yet in the movie's a mess, but it is a lot of fun to watch. And that was one of the films. I haven't seen that movie in about 20 years. I guess I had just blocked it out of my memory. I see why after having watched it today. It is a fun movie though. Another film that I watched, I haven't seen much Universal horror this October, because I'm really familiar with most of the Universal horror films. And like I said, I'm trying to expand my horizons and watch some of the things in my collection that I just haven't seen so far. But I did pull out one because when I pulled it out, I didn't remember that I had seen it not that long ago. And it's The Ghost of Frankenstein. Now, The Ghost of Frankenstein is, I think it's a very good movie for one particular performance, and that's Bela Lugosi. He has more lines than anybody else in the film, yet he's billed, I don't know, fourth or fifth, something along those lines. And he really should have top billing because
Yeah.
he has the most lines. His lines are so poignant too. They'll break your heart if you listen to, and the way he delivers them. I mean, that has a lot to do with it as well. It sounds so sincere, and he does. It might be his best performance, excepting Dracula. In a couple of his other bigger films. White Zombie, he's really good at too. But in this, he really tugs at the heartstrings in The Ghost of Frankenstein, and it is Universal from 1942. It stars Lon Chaney Jr. as the monster. Um, he Boris Karloff, by 1942, he was getting up in years. He had seriously injured his back during the filming Frankenstein. When he picks Colin Clive up and throws him over his shoulder and starts taking him up into the windmill, um, he messed his back up because you're putting another man on your shoulder when you're like 45, 50 years old probably isn't a great idea. And he couldn't handle the makeup and the physicality of the role beyond 1939. He just couldn't do it anymore. So they gave it to Lon Chaney Jr., who I really like Lon Chaney Jr. as an actor, but this is not his finest hour. He does not do a great job with the role at all. And I don't know if it's because there's not a whole lot for him to do, and there's none of the pathos with the monster that you get in the original Frankenstein, which is where I think Boris Karloff really excelled. He was able to take what seemed to be this hideous monster and humanize him and get you to feel for it and feel some empathy, feel sorry for him. You don't get that at all from Lon Chaney Jr.'s Frankenstein. You just don't. And even when he has a rare opportunity where he can emote, he doesn't. He just, you can tell he's kind of over it. It's just not his role. Especially after coming out of the Wolf Man, where he does a spectacular job,
Yes, he
and
does.
and he does have a really meaty. He is the picture. If it weren't for him, I don't think the picture would have sold the way it did. But here he is just wasted. Yeah, well, there are two ways to look at that when talking about Lon Chaney Jr. He is, I think the director wastes him in it. I don't think he doesn't even have a whole lot of screen time, and when he does, he's not doing anything with it. Not his greatest performance. And sometimes, from what I obviously never met him or anything. He died in 1973. From what I've read, he could be difficult on set. He could also, from what I've read, he could be fantastic on set as well. I guess it just depended on Lon's mood and the day of the week. But here, you can almost tell that he's just not happy in this role. He'd been a starring role just a previous picture, and here just he's a mute monster that's really not given much to do. But Bela Lugosi is amazing. Like I said, I mean, I like Bela a lot. I've seen all of his pictures, but if you watch this film, you'll understand what I mean. He is excellent in it, and it's written pretty well. Some of the Universal films, especially the early '40s ones, they were cranking them out for wartime audiences, and some of the horror just wasn't there. It's here though. They do a good job with this one overall, and Bela is just tops. He's just superb. I can't sing his praises enough. in this movie. Now that I don't mean to indicate that he didn't always give his all, because he did. I mean, every film of his I've seen, and he made some really terrible movies. He does a good. He's good, even if the film is bad. And that's something that I read a quote not too long ago from Raquel Welch when she died. It was related to a film that she was in the early 70s called The Last of Sheila. And her summation of the film is that Raquel thought she was good in it, but thought the movie was terrible. Actually, the movie is pretty good, and Raquel is okay. But she said that when you're good in a bad movie, that it won't help your career. I I don't know about that one. I can think of several instances where people have been good in bad movies, and it has made their career. Um, and Nicolas Cage, gosh, he's made a career out of it.
Getting
But
off subject for a while, have you seen Renfield with Nicolas Cage?
I am dying to. We were going to watch it on either Peacock or Paramount Plus, and when we went to watch it, it was gone. Well, in the meanwhile, Greg found it on Prime. So we are going to watch it here in the next probably this weekend. I think this is Thursday. So yeah, we'll watch it this weekend.
He
I'm
made,
dying to see it. It looks fantastic.
he made a surprisingly good Bela Lugosi like Dracula. It was really amazing to uh,
Yeah, and just from what I've seen, of it, just little bits and pieces. I really like the atmosphere of it, and he looks great. So I have pretty high hopes for it. And it looks like they didn't spare any expense. It looks like they did a good job with it.
they did a good job.
Mhm. Anyway, though, going back to the Ghost of Frankenstein, I didn't really remember it. I know I've seen it, but I didn't remember it all that well. And I got really engrossed with it just because of Bela. I thought Bela Lugosi was just outstanding, and like I said, tugging at your heart, and doing a good job of it. That's hard to do in a horror film. To create empathy. We don't You don't see much of that in horror films anymore either. The bad, the monster, whether no matter what kind of monster it is, usually the monster is just evil incarnate, and then that's that. I like the more complex monsters that that you do feel sorry for from time to time. Yeah, I think it gives it a human element to it.
Marvel gets criticized for making its heroes complex, and we see their point of view, and they
See,
get.
and I don't buy it unless you can see the heroes, what the angle that the hero's coming from. I don't buy it. If I can see that, then I'll buy into it. If I can see what the hero's motivation is, but if
Villain. It made their villains like you could see. You might not agree with the villains, but you could see where they get their point of view from, or where their life experiences shaped them to see things in a particular way.
yes,
Uh,
what made them mean? Yes.
and they've been the internet's been like the people who respond to movies on the internet have been very critical of there's no good villains, and I like the villains in the MCU. I'm enjoying the MCU.
Good, because you have to feel something for everyone involved, and what happened to the antagonist that made this person, this killing machine. um and you really that it depends on the situation. It is fun to watch as you start watching a horror film, and one that comes to mind is Night of Dark Shadows, which I watched and hadn't seen in a long time. David Selby, who is from where I live now, Morgantown, West Virginia. He's from Morgantown. He's the star, and it uses some other Dark Shadows cast members, such as Grayson Hall, who was Julia in the original Dark Shadows. the doctor who makes Barnabas human again. She's excellent in it. Just so creepy. Kate Jackson in her first film role, or I should say an early film role. I'm not sure that it's her first. John Carlin is in it as well. Yeah, they're not really reprising any roles in this one.
No,
This is a completely new story.
alternate universe, Dark Shadows.
Yeah, it does take place in Collinwood, or what we think is Collinwood, but looks nothing like what we remember Collinwood looking like. Anyway, though, I had forgotten the film, and it's really good. It's not a very expensive movie. They filmed it pretty cheaply. And I think if I'm not mistaken, I think it was shot in Canada. I'm That comes to mind. Anyway, it's Dan Curtis. But it's a good film, and you watch David Selby, who, at the beginning of the film, you think, well, this is our protagonist, right? No, no, not at all. And I mean, it's surprising body count. Very, very interesting. Um, and worth a look too. I have seen it around quite a bit on some of uh, the free streaming services like Tubi and some of the others. It's pretty easy to watch, and I'm sure it's on YouTube. I'm sure we had found it on. Oh, I don't know if it was Turner Classic Movies. It might have been TCM, and we recorded it via DVR and watched it that way. But it's a good movie, and if you want to see the Dark Shadows gang tackle it with a different story, give it a watch. I do think it's a lot of fun.
Lara Parker recently passed on.
Yeah, isn't that Angelique? She was. I cut my teeth on Dark Shadows as a small child. I would run home from elementary school
Me too.
to get to see it. And we watched it every day at whatever time of day it came on. It would come on not too long after I got home from school.
Me too. And my mother still tells the story how I told her I'll tell my children one day that I saw the last episode of Dark Shadows when the last episode played and it was a psych out. You thought it was going to continue, but it didn't. I remember being phenomenally sad.
But you were right, weren't you? You can tell your children.
Yes.
Well, I've since seen them all. Well, not all of them. I think I got up to like season 3, and not that I lost interest, but I got sidetracked and never got back to it. But Laura Parker, there were a lot of good performances on Dark Shadows, but Laura Parker was amazing. She was really good at it, and I can't imagine Dark Shadows without her. From what I understand, uh, the role that they put her in was only supposed to be something temporary. They were not anticipating blowing it up into a major character. And audience response was so overwhelming, and because she was so good at what she did, that they kept her on. And the same thing for Grayson Hall. She was just supposed to be a story arc. She wasn't supposed to be a major character. But it's funny how many people of all different age groups kind of united around Dark Shadows, which, if you think about it had an excellent cast, but they spent no money on it at all, and a lot of it wound up. A lot of the first takes were terrible, but they weren't going to shoot it again. So you see people flub lines, and poor Joan Bennett. I mean, it just wasn't Tuesday if she didn't just completely butcher the script. she, and she's great in the show, but she did flub her lines a lot.
And the set shook and all sorts of the props.
Yeah, and you would see production assistants in the background walking through, but it was sometimes they had to go live with stuff, and you just had to get it done, and nobody cared. Because people at home, yeah, you probably did see it, but nobody really cared, and everybody bought into it anyway. So how awesome is that?
Very
And
awesome.
a first take is always, unless you get really lucky and somebody has an awesome impetus for performance, it's just not going to be the greatest, And having to go with your first take, that's got to be nerve wracking for an actor,
And
because you've got to. It's your only chance. You've really got to punch it up, and they do ham it up on Dark Shadows, and I think that's one of the
yes,
reasons why I love it.
and I remember discovering the I Ching ones, when I finally discovered that they exist, but they don't let you time travel. I was very disappointed.
Mhm. But yeah, Dan Curtis is. Well, I'm actually going to talk about another Dan Curtis movie here in a minute. I might as well just go ahead, shouldn't
Yes.
I? He is the, oh golly, the James Whale of television. He did horror. I'm sure Ryan Murphy, you, has a huge, owes a big, has a big debt of gratitude that he should pay to Dan Curtis, because Dan Curtis did such great stuff. He really did, and on a shoestring budget, which makes it really hard to do. If you've got like tons of money, yeah, you can make a great. Well, you should make a great movie. I don't. Some people have tons of money and make terrible films, but there you go. But the Dan Curtis movie that I wanted to talk about, it's actually the next one's a TV movie, and it's called Scream of the Wolf. And it's a really interesting movie. It's Peter Graves, Clint Walker, and Joanne Flug, who did a lot. She did a lot of television. Well, all three of them did, really, if you think about it. Peter Graves was just coming out of Mission Impossible. This was released the year after Mission Impossible went off, so it was one of his earliest roles post Mission Impossible. Clint Walker, had been Cheyenne in the late 1950s and early 60s. Went on to a movie career, but by the 70s was doing TV movies. And Joanne Flug had been an actress. She was in the film version of MASH, and then did a lot of television, and was once married to the game show host Chuck Woolery. And I believe she lives in Savannah, Georgia now, if I'm not mistaken. She did anyway. Anyway, the movie is all about this series of deaths that are attributed to a wolf, and then um, Joanne Flug is the erstwhile girlfriend of Peter Graves, and this werewolf type thing comes after her. Now, it doesn't get to her, it doesn't kill her, but it comes after her, and it starts going after other people in the town. And it was an interesting choice of the director to have absolutely no suspense in this movie, because there is none. Immediately the first time you see Clint Walker, you know immediately that he is the werewolf. It's the makeup, the way they've got his hair, the way they've got his hair called. The script, it's just like werewolf, 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 and the only person who doesn't get it is Peter Graves. He almost to the end of the movie insists that this man is his friend and he is not a werewolf. And the whole while, even Clint Walker's like, "Yep, werewolf." It's a fun movie. It's fun to see those three actors. But like I said, no suspense whatsoever. They indicate so much. I kept hoping for some sort of plot twist too. I kept thinking, well, gosh, they're gonna do something here. For a while, I had myself talked into believing that it was actually Joanne Flug who was the werewolf. I just wanted it to be somebody else. And nope, end of the movie, it's Clint Walker. I don't really know why they made the film, because I guess none of these people had anything to do that week. I don't know. It's not a bad movie. I mean, it's well acted. The principal actors do a great job, and 90% of it's just them, just those three. But oh, I mean, there's just nothing surprising about it at all. Horror film is supposed to reach out and grab you, you know?
Mhm.
It's supposed to send a chill up your spine. It's supposed to make you think and freak out. And when you wake up at 3 o'clock in the morning and you hear a noise, it's supposed to panic you a little bit. Not this one. Not a bit. It just doesn't do a thing like that. No, it's fun to watch. It's a TV movie. It's only 75 minutes, so it's not that much out of your life to watch it. But a very, very fun TV movie, even if there's no suspense in it and no scares, just nothing there to raise your blood pressure one bit. Now, I have watched a few that have been pretty creepy. That was right tonight. I was watching it. It's one of the movies that I've watched in stages. I actually had to go back and watch it today. I just wanted to put it all together. And it's really well done. It's called The Vampire's Night Orgy. The reason I watched it is because it's an alpha DVD, and I wanted to watch it to see if this was something I wanted to keep or something to put in the donate pile. And I've decided to keep it because it's a great movie. It stars Jack Taylor, who is an American expatriate actor. Born and raised in America, but had no career here at all to speak of, and started making horror films in Mexico, and then moving on later to Spain. I had quite a career making mostly Spanish language films overall. Still with us. I think he's about 87 years old at this point. But if you watch a lot of European horror films, he's going to look very familiar to you. You're going to have seen him in a number of other European horror films. And Helga Linnea, who used to be in lots of Peplum films in the early 60s, acted in lots of horror films in the early 70s. And she is I don't know how, lack of a better word, the goddess in the film. It's a really interesting movie about this bus of tourists that they break down in this really small, unnamed Spanish town. And one by one, the tourists seem to be dying or disappearing. And that's because everybody in the town's a vampire. It's really interesting. And okay, you figure that out pretty early on, but it's a creepy movie. It's really well done. Helga Linnea is, like I said, head vampire, and she does a great job. Looks beautiful, fangs. I mean, everybody's got pretty good fangs in it. The locals, uh, even when you can't see their fangs, they're pretty creepy people. They have the camera angles that they use make their faces slightly distorted. Um, they kill off characters you wouldn't think they would kill off. Um, it's just an interesting movie. Anybody who was killed by a vampire shows up again, in about 12 hours as a vampire themselves. So it's a fun movie to watch. The alpha copy that I have is all letterbox, which is great. So it's not pan and scan, so you can see the whole thing. The color's kind of blown out in the version that I have, and I haven't looked on YouTube to see if there's a better version of it. But the Vampire's Night Orgy is awesome. And a lot of the early 70s horror films will have, especially the Italian ones, will have gratuitous nudity. And this isn't one of those films. I guess I kind of thought that just from the,
The title, yeah.
yeah, it sounds like a 70s porn film or something, some porn film or something like that. And it's not. It's a straight up horror film, a really good Spanish horror film. well acted, creepy as all get out, and it'll give you some chills. I was impressed. And there again, this was an alpha that I had bought years ago, and was still in its shrink wrap. Had never taken it out to watch it, and wouldn't you know it, I decided it was a keeper. So it did not. It's not getting doted.
How do they feed normally, if the whole town is vampires? They'd have to rely on tourists or people coming through town to get to someplace else.
Well, yeah,
Everybody mysteriously vanished, who went there. I think it would arouse some suspicion,
there's
especially who they came back and moved to the town.
there's an interesting subplot in it. As they're trying to keep this busload of tourists there long enough to kill them all, yeah, essentially, they say that they keep telling them that the bus is broken down and they're trying to get help, but it's a remote village, so it could take a few days to get the bus fixed. In the meanwhile, they're having to feed the tourists, and they don't have that kind of food. They don't have food for humans around, so they run around and they start butchering other people to feed the tourists. And like I said, that's an interesting subplot. A woman finds a finger in her dinner, which looks pretty good. And there again, there are no great special effects in it. It's just all done with shadows and light and really good performances by the main actors. And two of the main actors in the movie, Jack Taylor and Helga Linné, are fortunately still with us, and that's pretty rare for a 50-year-old film.
Wow, this has indeed been, as you promised, a tour through lots of different types of horror movies, and
I've had a great time this month.
yeah, it seems so.
Yeah, I really have. And it really has energized me. I will say this: there's a cadre of horror films that I'm going to watch every year at Halloween, and I haven't pulled any of them out yet. One of them's The Mummy. That's probably my favorite movie, to tell you the truth.
The one with
The
Boris Karloff.
Yes, the 1932 version. It's melodramatic here and there, especially with David Manners and Zita Johann. But Boris Karloff is just amazing in it. Like I said, creepy as all get out, frightening. Just to look at it, in that film is terrifying. Um, and it's all performance. It's his makeup's not that. It's not scary or anything like that. It's just all performance on his part, but so well done. And I haven't seen any of my slasher flicks. Haven't watched any Herschel Gordon Lewis movies yet. And some of my favorites are 2000 Maniacs and Blood Feast. Obviously, that's a big one. It's really gross, but a lot of fun. Haven't seen any of the Friday the 13th films yet, or Halloween. Haven't watched any of those, but I will get around to that. In the lead up to Halloween, those last few days.
So we'll do a part 3 at some point.
Well, I didn't finish my, I didn't finish part 2.
I'll do part 2B next
Well,
time.
there you go. Yeah, because there was I watched a Judy Geeson movie called A Candle for the Devil. It was one that again we had the DVD of, and it's a fantastic little movie. And I sure would like to talk about it at some point. So yeah.
The conversation continues, and as always, I had a great time listening to you talk about various movies, and I also enjoy speaking with you as well. And I'm looking forward to our next conversation. Do you have
And so
Go ahead.
no, and so am I. I'm in a particularly good mood tonight. I had a great day. So
May that continue.
yes, yeah, I would appreciate another one tomorrow. Yes.
And before I forget, because my brain has been like diffused lately, I'm gonna talk to you about some changes I'd like to make next year.
Okay.
So expect that conversation at some point. If I
I'll look, I'll look forward to it.
thank you, give my regards to Greg and the
I'll do that.
kitties. I saw there was one kitty who's visiting during your presentation.
Yes, that is Tippy.
Thank you for joining us, Tibby. And thank you, a wonderful audience. This should be up on YouTube tonight or the latest tomorrow. And I hope that you join us, not only watching this episode, but in all future episodes. And now you can access past episodes as well, because we live in the information age and everything's only a click away. So thank you, Brian. Thank you, Tibby. Thank you, Greg. And thank you, audience. Until next time, this is us wishing you joyous journeys and amazing adventures. That didn't work.